Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 818. My opponent started off with e4 and I went with knight f6, the Alekhine's defense. So he played a very interesting variation. He goes e5, kicking my knight around, and c4, and c5. And I've seen all this before. The knight just goes back to d5. And then normally they play d4, sometimes knight to c3 or bishop to c4. In my experience, d4 is what I see in this position. But it looks like knight c3 and bishop to c4 are the main moves here. All this is nothing special for white, so black is really doing just fine here. You can support the pawn here. If white wants to give up the bishop pair and give you the doubled center pawns, that's okay. You can still get in this d6 move and bust up that unusual formation that white has. So this seems to be all okay. And then he played knight c3, which is one of the main ways to play it. And I take. At this point, white is threatening to win a pawn here on d5, and the knight doesn't have any great retreats. And you don't want to retreat anyway. You just give your opponent an advantage in development. So I took. And, the usual move is to take with the d-pawn. And I looked at this a little bit. I was thinking that maybe white could have something here with this pressure on the d-file. I mean, in the game, I was very easily able to get the move d6 or d5 in. But I was thinking, well, maybe with this added pressure from the queen, it could be difficult. But it turns out this is fine for black, too. So you just continue with normal development. Notice that this was a gambit. This pawn is just hanging here, but there's no real hurry to round up that pawn, and it's better to get your development underway. So bishop f4, continuing to clamp down, and now it's actually safe after you've gotten the knight out to grab that pawn. Let's see, white can come out with queen to g4 and g5. Well, I don't know. That looks like a crazy line. What did I look at? I guess that's what I looked at. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. You still don't have to grab the pawn there. Could bring the queen out with queen h4 to play against this this queen g5 idea. But in any case, it all seems to be okay for black. In the game, he took with the b pawn, so the d file remained closed, and so I just played d5 immediately. I could have taken the pawn again. It's not necessarily the best move here. Actually, d5 was just as highly rated, and I think what I said before is true here as well. Why not just develop a piece rather than grabbing a pawn and giving your opponent some unwanted compensation and easy development? So let's see, he took en passant, as I was expecting. I took back. And then he played knight to f3. And here I played knight c6. So that's an okay move, but maybe d5 is even better. I thought of this idea afterwards, I just get the tempo and get a solid center here, and I can develop my pieces. Although this light squared bishop might be a problem piece in this pawn configuration, and also once again in this position you can just grab that pawn, but it's not necessarily the best move here. I mean, it's one of the top 3 moves that the chess engine is considering at this point, but white has some compensation for it. So knight c6 is okay, and then he finally decides to take. I take back. He goes with d4. And I went with queen a5. Queen a5 is a bit adventurous. The chess engine would play simply with b6, which was one of the moves I was considering too. Just, open up a space here for your bishop to develop, and things should be fine for black. But this is okay as well, queen a5. And it's interesting to have the queen in an active position like that. So he went queen c2. I was kind of wondering how he was going to defend his c-pawn. And queen c2 is a double-purpose move. He's looking at these squares on the king side as well as defending the c-pawn. But I wasn't too worried. It looked like he didn't have much of an attack going. He does have the knight hopping in here, so I have to be a little bit careful. But at the moment, it doesn't lead to a whole lot. Yeah, it would actually force me to play g6 or f5, though. So that might be something for white. But he just castled, and I played h6 because I decided I didn't want the knight jumping into g5. My queen is looking at the g5 square, but his knight is supported by the bishop there, of course. So knight g5 would have been a feasible move there. So let's see, he played bishop to e3 and started lining up on this dark squared diagonal. I went with my development plan, b6, and queen d2. I went bishop b7, and now he played, as another idea here, I could have played knight e7. That bishop b7 and knight e7 were both pretty highly rated by the chess engine, and knight e7 would make my defense of the king side a little easier. So there's something to be said for that move as well. But anyway, I played bishop b7, and that's okay too. But I have put all my pieces over on the queen side, and spotting this and feeling in an optimistic mood, I guess, my opponent took here. But this is completely unsound. So let's back up. How play might have continued. I mean, there's an interesting line here with d5. I was kind of wondering about this during the game. Instead of, let's see, it's my turn. I played bishop b7. And instead of sacking there, he could push on with d5. And this leads to kind of an interesting position. Takes. Bishop takes, rook to d8. His pieces are all out. There's maybe, black is not in bad shape either. There's maybe some potential tactics along the d file there, and all my pieces are protected. And I have a very solid pawn structure. White's pawn are a little bit loose, a little bit fractured, but both sides have a bishop pair. Should be okay. And White's pieces are out and pretty active. So, I think the chess engine still gives an edge to black there, but not by much, so somewhere around even. Anyway, he sacked on h6. And this is completely unsound, although you have to find the right move, and I did find it. So queen to f5. Just bring the queen over and defend. And there is no attack after that queen f5 move. It turns out queen f5 is really the only move that gives a big edge to black. Other moves, white can have some compensation there, and black only has a slight edge. But after queen f5, black should really just win. But I have to continue to play precise moves. Rook a to d1. This is a good move because it's supporting the idea of the bishop coming to this diagonal and chasing my queen away. So I went queen g6 to try and force his queen to a worse square. And so this was a slight inaccuracy. It would have been a little better to move the queen to h7. And he probably would have dropped his queen back anyway. I don't suppose there's much point in this check here. But maybe I could just walk away from it too. The thing about queen g6 is that he did have the opportunity here to just trade queens. And then grab here with check. So he gets another pawn as compensation. Black should still be winning, but the winning margin is not as great as if I had played queen h7. But anyway, he didn't trade. He dropped his queen back to e3. Let's see, I played knight e7, so this is all good. He plays bishop to d3, harassing my queen. I drop back to g7. Plays g3 here. So I was trying to set up some tactics along this diagonal. And in fact, this knight was pinned to the spot because there was a mate threat on g2 there. So he had to play a move like g3 to be able to free the knight. And now here's my second somewhat inaccurate move in defense. The best move here is knight to d5. And the move I played was knight to g6. I guess I was still worried about the attack, but actually this is a bit of a passive move. The knight doesn't have a lot of great squares to go to here, and he starts to get some play now. So if we back up, knight to d5, just a more active posting for the knight, and there's still no attack over here. So the chess engine gives this line, queen e4, rook to b8. This leads to an interesting sequence of tactics. So certainly I'm threatening to move this knight with the discovery, so the queen drops back, and then I can take over here. And the point is that it's the knight is hanging, but his knight is hanging too. So queen takes knight, bishop takes knight, and but it doesn't end there. The tactics continue. Bishop h7 check. I can take that, and he can take my bishop. But at the end of the day, I stay a piece up after all of those exchanges, and it's a simplified position, which is easier to defend. And let's see, I have 4 pawns, and he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he's only got 1 pawn for the piece. So all of that would be good for me, yeah, because I grabbed the c3 pawn at the beginning of that sequence. So knight d5 is the best way to play there. So knight g6 is a little bit passive. Let's see, he goes knight g5, and now bishop e7 is the final inaccuracy that really kind of lets him in the game and turns us competitive. I just wasn't aware of these tactical ideas on e6. And if I had been, I might have found the move rook a to e8, and that keeps a pretty solid edge for black. So, but I wasn't seeing that. I just wanted to trade off his knight or chase it away, maybe set up some kind of discovered attack on it, and he found the tactic. So good for him. And after this, the chess engine still thinks black is better, but now white's compensation is up to 4 pawns for the piece. But the attack still is not really going anywhere, and I don't screw up too much after this. So I keep an edge, or at least an equal position for the rest of the game. But the thing is, I can't avoid giving that piece back. I'm in check, and I have to block it. And so this is all forced. He takes, I take, bishop takes. So this is the position we end up with as a result of that knight takes e6 tactic on move 23. So it's a position where I have the bishop pair, and he only has 1 bishop. We both have a pair of rooks, and he has 4 extra pawns. If you think of it, say these two match up with these two, so he's got 1 plus 3. He's got 4 extra pawns. But the chess engine still prefers black just slightly. And I play the rest of the game reasonably well. So just, activate your pieces and go after those pawns. That's your task when you have the piece and your opponent has the pawns. You've got to start taking those pawns. And with your extra piece, you have good odds. So let's see. He played rook f to e1, hitting my bishop. Yeah, the rook f to e1, like I said. So bishop to f6, looking at those pawns. He goes rook to e3, maybe looking to double on the e file. I go rook to c7. I'm going to double on the c file, or perhaps come over and harass his bishop. He goes f4. I go bishop to d5. So starting to freeze those pawns in place. He goes rook to d2. And now I get to double on the c file. I was going to double the move before, and then I saw this bishop f5 move, and I wasn't sure it was any good. But then I realized by this point that when he plays bishop f5, I don't have to move my rook. I can just take the pawn, because if he takes my rook, I'll take his rook. And that's what happened. Actually, right here, at this point is where I get a winning edge after he does take my rook. He could have tried a different line here. The chess engine found another way to kind of keep black in the game. That's this move, bishop e6 check. I take. It's forced exchange. He takes back. I bring my king up to defend the bishop, and he can push the d pawn forward. And so I still have the extra piece, but I no longer have the bishop pair. The bishop pair can be really quite effective operating against the rooks and rounding up pawns. So I've just got this lone bishop as my extra piece, and 1, 2 versus 1, 2. Yeah, and he's got 3 pawns for it, and his rooks are pretty active, and this guy is cemented in the center of the position. So it's not so much about the material as it is about the better activity of white's pieces. The way he played it, he played bishop takes c8. So I get the rook. Let's see, he plays king f2 to chase my rook back. And I go over to a3, and I'm just rounding up this pawn we look at the material, I'm still just the one piece up, and it's still 3 extra pawns for him. But with now, I have the better piece activity. That's the real difference, and I can use this to scoop up those pawns. So after he played bishop takes c8, after he grabbed my rook there, then it's just winning for black. So I played this part reasonably well, although there was one interesting tactic here. Let's see. He played g4, and I just grabbed on a2 because that's what I've been planning to do. But there's a series of interesting moves here, a series of interesting tactics, starting with bishop to h4 check. So if you want to, I followed through the different lines here, but if you want to pause the video here and think about all the different ways that that black could profit from having the bishop pair and the rook, and a somewhat exposed king. It's kind of interesting, a good exercise. Okay, yeah, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to just go through some of these lines here. So bishop here, maybe if the king wants to stay on the second rank, notice that the light squared bishop controls that one, the dark squared bishop controls that one. It has to go to e2. And then there is bishop to f3 check. And now the king really is forced to the back rank, and it can't go to e1. It has to go back to f1. And now the killer move is rook to c3. And so this is the key idea in a lot of these variations. It's a double attack. It's threatening the bishop here, and it's threatening to come to the back rank and just deliver a mate. Notice that that's a back rank mate with the bishops covering all the escape squares of the queen. So that's a kind of cool thing you should keep your eye out for, especially in the longer games where you have time to look for it. But just this kind of position where he's pushed his g-pawn forward, so his king is exposed to some checks. Yeah, it was that g4 move that really opened up all these tactics. Let's see. Let's show a few more examples. Say he goes to the back rank. He could go to f1 or g1. Try f1 first. And you have this check. And now he's got 2 squares he could move to. He could come forward to e2 again, or he could go over to g1. Say he comes to e2. You have rook to c3 right away, hitting the bishop. The bishop saves itself. Then you have this bishop f3 with check, forcing the king to the back rank again. Once again, it has to go to f1, and then there's a mate. this way he actually gets mated. So that's no good. Let's see, after the rook f3 check, instead of going to e2, he can go to g1, and then once again, rook to c3 is the idea, coming from this direction, hitting the rook, but threatening a mate. And if the bishop goes to a6, you can deliver the check, and he can block it. But then you have bishop to c4 there, and you win that piece. And notice the rook can't even come over and defend the bishop because the other bishop is covering those squares. So and then the last place is he could go directly to g1, but that's kind of similar. It's rook to c3, hitting the bishop first, and then rook to c1 check with the mate threat, and so he has to block with the bishop, and bishop to c4 again. So a lot of interesting ideas there, all enabled by this this move g4. So that move should have been a little bit of a trigger for me, I guess, to start looking for tactics once the king has become exposed to a check there. But anyway, the way I played it is winning, of course. And it's the move I had planned. So I took the pawn. He went and traded, and then I looked at this endgame to see if there were any big improvements. But it looks like it's just winning all the way for me. It might have been maybe a little. Is there no? There's actually no way for him to. Oh no, I can't say that. He could have saved the pawn by bringing his king up. He can't push it forward because my bishop is guarding this square that he advances to, and the other bishop is threatening to take it where it is, and this bishop can't defend it. But he could defend it with the king. So this might have been a way for him to put up some stiffer resistance. But anyway, he played this g5 move, and now it's pretty easy. And in any case, it was winning all along. At the end, I was wondering if he would have been better off trading bishops at a certain point. Oh, this was a nice tactic that I spotted. I always look for these ideas of distracting this bishop away from its defensive job. It's got to hold back these pawns. I mean, a key part of my advantage here is that these pawns are on the opposite side of the board from his king, and my king is in front of his pawn. So that makes the job of winning this endgame a lot easier. And then you can take advantage of it by grabbing pawns here and there and harassing his bishop. So let's see, he went for the check, but this doesn't work out. I gather up the last of his pawns, so he has no threat. If he takes my bishop, I'm still queening, so he drops back. See, I went king f6, and they started marching his king over, which he has to do, but it's a little too slow. Went bishop here, and he went bishop b1 out of the way. I was wondering if taking would help, but this doesn't work. Not that. Of course, I take the bishop. And it's a nice point. He can bring his king over to this square, but I can get my pawn all the way up to b4. Now these two pawns are defending each other, and he can't ever take them, and I can just bring my king over and support them. So that would win. Let's see. He went bishop to b1, and I just pushed my pawn to a2, and that is winning as well. So after this exchange, let's see, he played king d2. But then he resigned. I wasn't going to have too much trouble. This is not a rook pawn. This is the wrong if it were a rook pawn, that is actually the wrong square. But it's not a rook pawn, so that's an easy win from this point. Okay, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.